Foreign exchange markets. Okay. As we know that international trade and cross-border transfer of capital, they require exchange of foreign currencies. Okay. And the purpose of the foreign exchange market is to permit trade of one currency with another. So this is the market where one currency is exchanged with another currency. Now, there is no centralized meeting place like the stock market and no fixed opening and closing time. Okay. Most transactions in the currency market are channeled through a worldwide telecommunication network. Okay. It takes place in the interbank market. We'll talk more about the structure of today's complex and integrated foreign exchange market. The bottom line here is that all the participants in the foreign exchange market, they are linked with one another through an interbank market, which is a wholesale market of major banks, brokers, and dealers. And most of the transactions take place via a telecommunication network known as SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications. This connects more than 10,000 financial institutions and corporations across the world and processes millions of transactions every day. Okay, but as I said, we'll talk more about the structure of this foreign exchange market very shortly. What are the functions of the foreign exchange market? Broadly speaking, there are three functions of the foreign exchange market. Again, these are discussed in section 5.1 of your textbook. Okay. First of all, it helps transfer purchasing power between countries. Okay. So, for example, when you want to import, when you import goods from one country, from another country, you are basically transferring your purchasing power. Okay. And it is the foreign exchange market that facilitates the transfer of purchasing power. Okay. Cross-border trade of goods, services, and capital, they involve parties living in one country with different national currencies. Okay, so the transfer of purchasing power is of vital importance, and foreign exchange market helps facilitate the transfer of purchasing power. Okay. Next, foreign exchange market, they provide credit for international trade transactions. Remember, movement of goods and services and capital between countries. It's a time-consuming process. Okay, so the inventory in transit must be financed. Okay, for example, letters of credit are used for facilitating international trade. Okay, we'll talk about letters of credit later in a greater detail in this unit, but the bottom line is international trade takes time, and there must be some party, some financial institution who is willing to provide financing for the inventory in transit. Okay, say for example, if an Australian company wants to import raw materials from Malaysia, how is the whole process evolved? First, the Malaysian company offers a price. Okay. And if the Australian importer is happy with that price, the Australian importer places an order. Okay. Now, the Malaysian exporter is not sure about uh, how credit worthy is the Australian buyer is. Okay. First of all, the Australian importer does not want to pay upfront, okay, unless and until the product is shipped, or maybe unless and until the product arrives at Melbourne port, for example. Okay, the Malaysian importer does not want to pay upfront. The Australian importer does not want to pay upfront. The Malaysian exporter, on the other hand, is not sure about how creditworthy the Australian importer is. So the Malaysian exporter is also not willing to sell in credit. Okay. So a participant, a bank, a participant in the foreign exchange market bridges a link between the importer and the exporter. Okay. And by issuing a letter of credit, for example. So a letter of credit provides guarantee that the Australian importer will make a payment in upon the receipt of the Malaysian products. If the Australian importer fails to make the payment, the bank will pay on behalf of the Australian importer in this example. Okay, so that is the purpose of the letter of credit. And why we need a letter of credit, why we need some sort of financing here? Because the two parties are located in two different countries, governed by two different sets of regulation and laws. Okay. And more importantly, it takes time to, there's a time gap between when the importer places an order and when it receives the goods, or the receive the goods at the importer's port, for example, seaport, for example. Okay. And the foreign exchange market, it has historically provided this credit service to facilitate cross-border trading. Okay. So that is the second function of foreign exchange market. Finally, foreign exchange market minimizes the exposure of exchange rate risk. Okay. So at any time you do a transaction, there is a risk that the exchange rate will change, okay, between the time when you sign a contract and the time when the contract is actually executed. Okay. And that is known as the foreign exchange risk. The risk is that it may go in a direction, it may change towards a direction which is not in your favor. Okay. And foreign exchange market helps us minimize the exposure to exchange rate risk. Okay. We'll talk about this. This is actually a major part of our discussion, like how the foreign exchange market is used to reduce the exposure to exchange rate risk. Okay. We are not going to talk about the financing services in more detail, but the third function, minimizing exposure to risk, that is something we'll spend more time later on. Okay. Now, the structure of the foreign exchange market, as I told you previously, that foreign exchange market, it is based on two factors. First of all, supply and demand of a particular currency in the foreign exchange market. Okay, you know that from your second lecture, I guess, where we talked about the demand and supply of foreign currency. Okay, you remember we used a simple demand and supply diagrams, okay, that we learned from our basic economics class, and I will urge you, I'll request you to use that supply and demand diagrams to understand changes in the exchange rate. Okay, that will help us understand it properly. Okay. So demand and supply of foreign currency, that is one of the determining factors of the foreign exchange market. Another factor is market information and expectations. Okay? I told you previously that there are parties in the market, okay? Speculators, arbitrageurs, investors. They participate in the market based on market information and their expectations. Okay? They try to expect the movement of exchange rate in the near future to in the long run, and also in the long run. So, and based on that expectation, they participate in the market. Okay. So demand and supply and expectations and market information. These are the factors that determine exchange rates. Okay. However, we talked about those in our previous classes. Now we are talking about the structure of foreign exchange market, and I told you that there is no fixed marketplace and there is no fixed time slot. Okay, for there's no fixed operating hour. Okay, what happens is the trading day, the trading of foreign exchange, it begins every morning in Tokyo and Sydney. Okay, it starts from the Far East. Okay, the trading day begins each morning in Sydney and Tokyo. Then it moves west to Hong Kong and Singapore, and then it moves further west to the Middle East, shifts to the European markets such as Frankfurt, Zurich, and London, and then it moves to the Atlantic, to New York, continues to move further west to Chicago, and ends in the west coast of the USA, two large markets, San Francisco and Los Angeles. So every day it starts from the Far East, Tokyo and Sydney, and moves to the west gradually and ends in San Francisco.